Okay, so I am Dr. Andrea Labuti, and this is our third live Q&A. I have Helena here. She is the wonderful mother of Joao, our soul doctor, or young man that has autistic, intuitive, energetic healing about him. So hello, Helena. I'm so glad you're here again.
Hello, Andy. It's wonderful to be with you again and all these people who are following us. I've got Joao's responses right in front of me. I've typed them out. Our soul doctor at the moment, he isn't here. Let's see if he comes along. He finished off answering some questions and he went to take a rest.
Sure.
And that's just how the soul doctor works. So he finishes his job and he leaves it up to me and up to you.
Okay, good, good. Well, I am really looking forward to talking about these questions today. We have 7 questions today. The first 4 are going to be in relation to communication, because there are, obviously with autism, a lot of fears and worries surrounding communication, especially for those parents who have children with nonverbal kids, and you know, different devices and different modalities like RPM and other facilitated communication is a pretty hot topic right now and very effective for a lot of people, but some people still struggle with it. So we're going to talk about that, and then we're also going to answer some questions about computer screen time, iPad use, video games, things like that, because that's another hot button for parents. You know, we fear and worry about how much time our kids are spending on screens. All right, so
yes,
okay, so I'm going to start and I'm going to ask the question, and you're going to give Joao's response, and then we can go from there. So the first question is, how can I help my 25-year-old son communicate more effectively? So this is the a little bit of background. My 25-year-old son struggles to use sign language, augmentative communication, such as touch chat on the iPad, rapid prompting method, or RPM, and typing. As his communication partner and mother, I struggle to understand his answers to open-ended questions on the letterboard. How can I help my son communicate more effectively? My son is so intelligent, and I want so desperately to communicate effectively with him. Okay, your turn.
Okay, here is the answer by the soul doctor. Dear mom, thank you for writing and letting me start. And let me start by telling you that being desperate does not do any good. You are pushing and pushing, but the more you push, the more resistance you will face. Individuals with autism are souls who reincarnated with the mission of awakening humanity and have no wish to be totally grounded as long as the appropriate conditions have not been met. And one of them is acceptance of what is and having families relearning to communicate. Oral and written expression are important, but have led people to put their attention outward. It is important to relearn to look inward and practice listening to our inner voice, at the same time visualizing people who we want to reach and sending love and telling them what is in our heart. If you surrender, you will open space to hear your son telepathically, and when you do this and he feels you no longer push, he will adhere to communicating as you wish, whether through a letterboard or any other method he feels appropriate. Blessings, João Carlos. I think, as you said, Andy, what João puts forward here is something that we as parents normally focus extremely on, which is the expectancy of getting from our children a voice, whether it is written expression or oral expression. And sometimes there is excessive focus on that, and the child feels pushed or resistant. And we also have to go beyond that way of thinking, because communication is far more than communicating through speech or in writing. We are always communicating with one another. There is body language, and even if we are more silent and we are more open to listening and viewing our children, we will start understanding them from another viewpoint, from the heart.
Yeah, and one of the things that I realized, as despite having read this several times, the last part of this where he says oral and written expression are important but have led people to their attention outward. It's important to relearn to look inward. So he's really describing here, practice listening to your inner voice. At the same time, visualize people who we want to reach, send love, and telling them what's in your heart. So he's really telling us how to communicate with people without words. And that just struck me as really, really important and good, because I always ask myself, okay, well, I want to communicate with my son telepathically, right? Who wouldn't? But how the heck do I do that? And I think that we think it's some big fancy process, but obviously it's really not. And it's a much more heart-centered way to connect with a person and communicate.
And I also think he focuses on one other thing, is before we manage to communicate with another, we have to relearn to communicate and to hear our own voice.
Yes.
Our inner voice. So
right.
I think that is also a message for us parents in general, that we have to, if we want to listen to the voice and have sound, first we have to work on the silence, on listening to ourselves. It looks contradictory, but it's really, I think the key is there, looking inward, listening to our voice, and only then will we be open and create a space to be able to hear the voices of our children, because they are communicating with us all the time. However, there is an extreme focus on our part of what we acknowledge as communication.
Good
we
point.
Focus too much on the sound, on language, and on written text. And communication is far more than that.
That's true. And many parents out there might be thinking, yeah, but let's be practical here. We live on Earth, right? And we need to communicate with this kind of language. But I think the point here that Joao makes, and he makes it in some of the other question and answers that we're going to talk about, is we have to sort of meet them where they are. So yes, we want them to communicate using words, but they want us to communicate and listen to our intuition, and to communicate and hear the inner voice, which is really spirit, or our God consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. And that's part of the process of us returning to spirit and source and love and the infinite wisdom and higher self, everything that we have inside, because looking outward has caused a big mess on this planet, and it's time to look inward, right?
Yes, and I think one of the things that's curious about autism is that these children are simply not here to be pushed.
Right.
We either really start working on ourselves and are eager to reach these children. Otherwise, I don't think the bridge will be able to be crossed.
Right. Right. Because it's, yeah, and that whole idea of ego is our idea or our control or our need for things to be a certain way, because we think that that is the only way that we're going to have happiness, or the only way that things will turn out. And when you let go of that and trust the inner voice, then you get far greater than what your little ego could possibly conjure or create on this planet. So it's really a movement back to love and good, divine guidance and our true selves. So
and our inner power.
Yeah. Yes. Empowering. Very empowering. I just wanted to, for people out there that are getting freaked out that we're talking about telepathy, and I don't know if a lot of you are or not, but it still is, I'm a Western trained medical doctor. If I were to talk about this stuff in the circles that I run when I'm at work, people would look at me really crazy. But I want to share an experience that my friend had with her son. And this is a patient that I used to see when I had a private practice. He was 10 years old at the time, and I won't use his name. But he would come in every week, and we were doing lots of, you know, nutritional therapies, IV vitamin C and other things. And he would always jump around the room, and he'd come up to me and he'd look in my eyes and he'd back around. And I just sort of knew in my heart that he was in there, but we didn't really know. But I sort of, you know, I would look at him and I'd say, I know you're in there. I know you know everything that's going on, even though he jumped around the room and seemed completely aloof to what was going on. So fast forward, so he was 10 at the time. Fast forward 6 years, which was, I don't know, was it 6 months ago or a year ago? She called me up and she said, I have to tell you the story about my son. And I'm going to say my son so I don't use his name. He has been doing RPM for about a year now, and I've learned how to do it, and I can have conversations now with him. We use the letterboard and he can communicate. Well, one day he was feeling, he seemed really uncomfortable. We were in the house and my husband's friend was over, and my son just kept pacing back and forth, and he was pacing back and forth and just looked really uncomfortable. So I said, hey, let's go in the kitchen and talk. So she goes in the kitchen, gets out the letterboard and says, what's going on with you? And he says, that man thinks I'm bad. And she says, what are you talking about? Dad's friend thinks I'm bad, thinks autism is bad. And she said, what are you talking about? He hasn't said anything. Why would you say that? And he typed, you know, spelled out, I read minds, Mom. And she's like, what do you mean you read minds? I read minds, Mom. And so, you know, long story, fast forward, her and her husband did what I think any parent would do. They would test it, right? Let's hide this word over here and let's see if he knows what it is. What am I thinking? And of course, he was able to do all of it. So that was just a wake-up call. This is a normal family, you know, normal autistic family with a nonverbal kid who had no idea, isn't into all the, you know, woo-woo stuff out there, just has this child that came to them and said, I read minds. So it's just sort of a point I want to make, because they will surprise you if you listen to them. And I just felt like that was just such a good, powerful story, and why it's so important for us to allow them to communicate the way they need to and to be open to these things.
Yes, and I can say that with the story that you've just told, I went through a similar situation, and I guess we've all got stories of things which happened with our children or even with friends. I think we've all got the capacity of communicating telepathically, only we're just too focused on, once again, on other ways of expression that we've forgotten about it. But I think it happens naturally. Sometimes you think of somebody and the person rings you up. You just communicated.
Sure.
So I think it's just a relearning process. It's all there.
Sure. I totally agree with that. I think we just brush some of those things off as coincidence when they're really not coincidence. They're more like synchronicities. Yeah. So definitely out there. So everybody out there that's listening, if you want to fine tune your intuition and your ability to communicate without language, quiet yourself and just free whatever's in your mind, if you can, and sit still, and then just listen to that quiet voice and see what comes up for you. That's where I've gotten a lot of answers to a lot of questions that I have with what to do with my son, what to do with my life, what to do with the school I'm doing, like all these different things. When I just sit and listen to that quiet voice, I know when the answer is the right answer, because it feels so good and it just sort of falls on me. It's like, wow, that's it, you know? So it's pretty cool, powerful stuff. Makes your life better.
Yes, at first it is a bit difficult because we have difficulty in silencing the mind, but after some practice, we're able to sit still, and even if we do not get the answer immediately, when we're walking or when we surrender, it suddenly pops into our mind and we've got the answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's go on to the second question. Why does my 10-year-old son become aggressive and refuse to communicate and enjoy being treated like a baby? So here's a little background. I am teaching my 10-year-old son to communicate through facilitated communication. I have the feeling that he doesn't want to or can't work with me. Once he was working with an experienced therapist, he revealed that he didn't want to work and wanted to be treated as a baby. Why isn't he motivated to improve his communication with me through FC? When he gets upset, he sometimes scratches and hits. How can I help him to reduce his aggression? Is there any, and then just an added question, is there any sport or activity that you would recommend for my son to try? And how does Joao respond?
Joao responded, dear mom, first of all, let me start by telling you that communication in autism occurs in a variety of ways and not always as you may expect. Your son is still not open to communicate in the way you might want him to, and therefore reacts aggressively, expressing his frustration at not managing to express himself in the way you would like. He is frustrated at having things imposed as if it will make him more fit concretely in society. Your son wants to be like a baby because babies communicate and people can understand them despite no verbal expression on their part. Let that be your starting point with your son. As for sport, start off with hiking because it soothes the mind, besides doing wonders for the physical body. As you calm down, so will your son. Blessings.
So that there's that whole thing about pushing and imposing things. And I think that the energy of your intention is the key here, because you know, people will ask, well, how do I want him to communicate but not impose it on him? I think it's really the energy behind what you're doing. It may not be the time for your child to communicate right now. Maybe you need to go back and, you know, often Joao says, join him or her with playful, you know, playfulness, join them in their behaviors, join them in what they're doing. So they feel a sense of, everything doesn't have to be on your terms and what you want me to do, but we can have some time to do what I want to do. And again, the sunrise principles, which I love, but that's why it's so powerfully effective.
Yes, and sometimes we have aggression, which is a way that these children, when they are too pushed and picking up the energy and negative thoughts and people not believing in them, saying one thing and doing another, aggression becomes also a way of communicating. So we have to be very careful. And when these episodes of aggression occur, I think it is important for us to stop and say, okay, what is happening here? How am I feeling? What's going on with me too? What's going on in this environment, in this space? And what are my fears or thoughts? My mind patterns, and even what is the missing key here? Because aggression, as I said, is often a means that a child finds in order to get away from a particular situation in which he feels or she that they're not being respected.
Yes. Yeah, we so often forget that you know, our underlying feelings or thoughts about, you know, whether the expectations, I guess, like this person is not really capable and you're with them and you're working with them, or teachers, for example. You know, not all teachers. I mean, I love teachers and God bless the ones that are working with our kids that have the right intentions, but there is a level of disbelief at their potential. And just imagine if you were working for a boss that was, you know, just sort of looked at you as somebody that they have to hire for some reason, and they don't believe that you're capable because you don't have a certain degree or you don't do things a certain way. And they're just constantly body language, passive aggressive, whatever it is. And they're really chipping away at your self-esteem and your abilities in yourself. Any one of us could put ourselves in that position and know that we would feel horrible. And unfortunately, a lot of the loved ones of children with autism do that unintentionally because we just don't know. I still do it with my son. I asked Joao a question just last week, and he said something about your expectations will largely determine how far your son goes. And I thought, I always forget about that. You know, my husband has been the one who has championed skiing for all three of my boys. I've been terrified of letting him ski. He's a fabulous skier now because his expectation was he can ski. And mine was, oh my God, he's going to kill himself. So I let him handle it. But look at what could come out of it. And it would be a very different environment if I were the one teaching him to ski versus my husband, who had complete, like, he was totally fine with it and totally believed that it was possible. So that's a point that we like to make, so parents really remember to look at their children with capability, not disability.
Yes, and I think there's also an important point that Joao brings up in this message to this mom, is that your son wants to be like a baby because babies communicate. So once again, we are always communicating. Even if we do not express ourselves orally. So babies babble. They are incapable of telling us what they need, what they're feeling, etc. And because we accept this inability or this difficulty, we develop ways naturally of understanding, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, and we leave that open space, and we don't tend to become rather tense, and we do not look at the baby and say, okay, you have to tell me what you really want, otherwise I am incapable of understanding you. I think the link between a mother and a child, or whoever, the caretaker or whoever is taking care of a baby, you sort of develop such a strong bond that you, after a certain time, not very long, you know what the child, what the baby wants.
Yeah, it's that intuition. So without actual language, mothers are very in tune and open to, you know, other things, whether they're seen or not seen. But that's that intuition that we as mothers have all tapped into. We know when our baby's hungry, or we know when they're going to wake up, or what they need. You know, not all the time, but a large portion of the time.
Yes, and even if we take to another field, for example, we communicate with animals, don't we? With our pets sometimes, especially dogs.
Yes.
I love dogs. And whenever I look at, you sort of know what the dog is expressing, or what the dog wants from the expression and from the look in the eyes. So we just have to have a broader perspective of communication. I think autism is here to teach us also a little bit about communication, what this means, and how we can overcome this pitfall in regard to autism, or what we consider as a pitfall.
And once again, we could take communication as a invitation to look inside, to get in touch with your intuition, which is what a lot of these kids are here to help us do. So it comes in so many forms, right? We keep coming back to the same thing, and what a beautiful orchestrated thing that they're doing for us. If you can get past all the frustrations, which we can.
Yes, and the thing is, I think they're making an invitation. Are you willing to reprogram yourself and go beyond the formatting that has been imposed on you, or are you going to stick to your old beliefs? And I think each of us has a choice, and whatever the choice we decide, we will have an outcome.
Absolutely, but it's our choice.
Yes, life is a choice.
Yep, and change is hard, but just try it out and get a little taste of how good it can be, and then maybe things will open up.
Yes.
All right, so there's another communication question here. So the background, this is a short one. I have an 11-year-old son with autism, and he is nonverbal. We have been using RPM to facilitate communication, but he seems resistant and not very motivated. How can I get my son to be more motivated to do RPM and also to become more fluid and skilled at it? I would love to know how we can make the experience more motivating for others too.
Okay. Dear Mom, let me start by telling you something in regard to your question on how to help your son. First of all, it is important to take into account tremendously the type of beings we are dealing with. Unlike what humanity has been used to, individuals with autism favor other types of communication, like telepathy and not oral or written expression, which is what most people do. Autistic individuals are souls which incarnated with the purpose of raising up humanity through the bridging of differences and awakening. That being said, your son will not feel motivated to communicate through RPM or any other means solely on your terms or what has persisted throughout times. The first step is for you to work on acceptance that he may not be fully motivated now, and join him in his singular form of communication. Join him in his stimming or other behaviors with childlike playfulness and without judgment. Make him feel at ease and not constrained. And when he feels this loving space without imposition or expectation, he will open up and give hands to bridge his world and yours. Only then will he feel the want and need to find a means to get his word out, be it spoken or typed, RPM or facilitated communication. Blessings, Joao.
So same message. I love it. It's, you know, people ask questions in different ways, but the answer is the same when it comes to this. There's a lot of pushing and imposing and really desiring that person to be a different way than they are right now. And that in and of itself seems to be the thing that's keeping them that way, which is sort of the irony of it.
Yes, and I also think the message here is I'm willing to communicate on your terms if you're willing to communicate or learn to communicate on my terms. So It's a sort of a deal and compromise that has to be reached between ourselves and our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's do the final question on communication. And then we're going to get into some questions about usage of devices and iPads and things like that. So how can we communicate with our 5-year-old grandson who is nonverbal with autism? I am the grandmother to a 5-year-old boy with autism. His communication skills are so limited and he has sensory processing disorder. I am a health coach, but have had minimal success with positive changes. It is so frustrating as he is about to enter public kindergarten. We have tried all we know, but still can't communicate with our precious grandson. What can we do? I also wonder if there is a genetic or past generation issue we need to address. Any recommendations you have would be greatly appreciated and wholeheartedly received. We desire the ability to communicate with our grandson and to see him flourish as the sweet little boy he is.
Dear grandmother, your grandson is like a child with telepathic means of communication. Nowadays, there is a significant number of children who are highly sensitive and are very much in touch with their soul or higher self. For them, speech is not necessary to communicate because they communicate telepathically and pick up on people's thoughts. I suggest not putting so much stress on verbal communication so as not to create tension and seek out ways of improving the family's belief systems and thought forms linked to your grandson's speech. When this aspect loses the heightened focus it has, the family will make a quantum jump in their sensitivity and be able to connect to him telepathically, and he will be more available to try and connect through speech. Yes, there is a past generation issue to address linked to communication, or rather miscommunication. Your grandson has come forth with this issue for all those around him, especially family, to learn to communicate based on the energy of love and acceptance and not on demand.
So that one, again, we're saying sort of the same thing, but what I really hone in on is when this aspect loses the heightened focus it has. So that's where we're so, so so focused, it's not resisting, but so trying to control the outcome, putting so much energy of worry. It's an energy of worry. It's not an energy of, I can't wait to communicate. I want to know what's going on in his head. Not that that isn't behind it, but the prevailing energy is this energy of, I want it to happen so bad. I need it to happen so bad. Why can't it happen? Why isn't it happening? So again, it's a flavor of intention versus relaxation and surrender.
Yes, whatever we focus on grows.
Now and what we resist persists. I love those. They're so cliche, but they're so true.
So if we keep on focusing on the lack, then we're going to have more lack.
Right.
And if we continue and persist on saying, I want him to do this, I want him to do that, you're also on a standpoint of lack. If you want something, it's because you do not have it.
Right.
So we have to be aware of our thoughts and our attitudes, and be mindful of where we set our focus. Are we going to set focus on the lack or on gratitude? Right.
The opposite, gratitude for what we have right now in this moment. One of my favorite spiritual teachers was just talking about that, Matt Kahn. And he says, listen, you can strive and you can want things and you can look to the future, but it's going to be a much harder road if you don't, at least along the way, stop and be grateful right now for exactly what you have. Find the gratitude. And I have been at this for a long time, and I am always reminded, like, these things remind me, like I was saying when I was typing some of this stuff up, it just really takes me back there. It's amazing after all of this exposure to this stuff, how I still have to keep reminding myself. It's an ongoing process. So that's why we're doing these videos. We want to blast you guys with all this information, and we're going to keep blasting you with it because we all need the reminders and we all need the help to keep refocusing. It's like, keep refocusing, go within all these other things. But I, for one, appreciate the reminders in all of his responses, because every time he gives a response, it's like a new aha. Oh yes.
It's the same thing here, Andy. It's the same thing. With Joao's answers, we always, or most of the times, we have the unexpected, a perspective that we weren't perhaps considering. That's something that has startled me with some of these answers, which is they're not normally what one would expect when someone says, okay, my child still communicates like a baby, or just wants to see a baby programs, etc. Mm-hmm. We as adults, we become worried about that situation, and Joao has given us such great insights and other perspectives of non-worry towards those situations.
Which is really, really helpful, and that's what we're going to get into next, because why are kids watching baby programs? Why are they on the iPad? We all worry about that. And I think that's a perfect segue into this next topic, because our next 3 questions are around devices. And his insights are soothing. They're really soothing to me, because I have a child that, I have 3 children that want to be on devices all the time, and it's a constant battle. Now, that's a little bit different than what he's saying here, but we'll get to that. So, why does my 12-year-old son only watch shows for 4-year-olds, and should we limit his time on his iPad? So the background here. My son wants to play on his iPad almost constantly. He wants to watch videos on the iPad or shows on TV that are not age appropriate. He likes shows that are for 4 or 5-year-olds, even though he's 12 years old. I am concerned about the amount of time he wants to spend on his iPad, and also the preschool programs he watches. I'm not sure if it's better for my son to have very limited time on his iPad or allow him to play whenever he wants. He doesn't include his family or anyone when he is on his iPad. Yet he constantly keeps asking for it when we limit it, and doesn't really seem interested in anything else. What is best?
The soul doctor says, "Dear mom, your concern about the iPad seems right on the perspective of what catches the eye. But let me soothe you about what is really going on. Your son loves his iPad because the light and colors of the screen turn down his brain receptors and calms down, not being so prone to the sounds, light, and smells around him that aggravate his sensory issues. With his iPad, he can focus and have a clear and restricted vision of the things on the screen. Whereas when he does not look at the screen, his vision field is overwhelming and petrifying, making him feel threatened and insecure. He likes the children's programs not only because of the sounds and colors, but also because children are very much connected to source and have not become totally alienated from their true self and formatted by society. Your son feels closer to his true self when watching these programs because adults have forgotten about their inner wisdom and power, and contrary to what they think, are very fragile and live by what is expected of them and not the voice within. When you look at your son and want him to heal, there is a part of yourself coming out of judgment. But when you embrace what seems to be the flaws, love pervades every cell and balance is restored to the body. And what you call healing occurs. Blessings.
So that is packed with a lot of very interesting information. There's the piece about his vision and his overwhelming visual stimuli unless he's focusing. So that's a calming thing. There's the whole thing about children's program and children's being connected to source and him feeling more connected to his true self, realizing that adults around have really forgotten their inner wisdom and power. And the part about being judgmental, and when you embrace the flaws, then things will open up. So that's really hard for us to wrap our brains around, you know, embrace the flaws and then everything will be okay. It's so counterintuitive, but for the few times in my life that I've been able to do that, it definitely works. So let's make a request of all parents out there that are listening. Just try to look at one flaw that your child is doing, one thing that you think is a flaw, embrace it with love and just thank it for being there and go with it and enjoy it and see what happens. I think that would be interesting. I'd love to hear comments about that too. But what are your thoughts, Helena, on this beautiful message?
When I read Joao's response, I was amazed, and I really had to look deeper into the issue. And the thing is, when you look at a child, in this case it's with autism, who is very much focused on his iPad, we immediately think, okay, there's too much time on his iPad, that's not good, he's being addicted to technology, etc., etc. The thing is, that child is really doing the best it can. He's trying to find some comfort in the discomfort that he or she continuously faces.
Yes.
And we have to keep that in mind. So this child that is very much attached to the iPad, is just trying to survive, to feel better, to find some comfort.
Right.
So that I found amazing.
Yes.
The other part, which really surprised me, came with this child wanting to watch children's programs. And the thing is, on the perspective of the adult, we tend to also make judgments on the autistic individual's IQ, etc., etc. Okay, we might look at this 7, 8, 11, or 12, 13, or even 14-year-old or even older, who is looking at these children's programs, and we might be, okay, there he has there is some kind of disability or low IQ or something. We are always judging, and the thing is, what is really happening has nothing to do with that, our perspective on it. It really has to do with, once again, the person being far more connected to its true essence, because children are very much connected to their source. They live in the present. They're far happier than what we are most of the times. And we as adults, we have been formatted many times to behave according to what others expect of us.
Right. Right.
And I think that is another lesson that we have to learn from autism, is that these children or these individuals, they are not here to simply comply with all that we demand from them.
Right.
They are here to reach a compromise.
Yes.
Based on love.
Yes.
Give and take,
Yes.
and take, and the balance.
Absolutely. You know, it's there's so many things that I want to say about this, because there's so many things that it triggered in me. But one of the things that it triggered was when you're looking at a child or a teenager that's looking at a preschool program, we automatically assume, if we don't know any of this stuff that we're talking about, we automatically assume that they're mentally challenged. Like they have some sort of mental deficit and they can't go beyond a preschool mentality. And so when we form that judgment, we are projecting onto them that they are not intelligent. And you can see how the ripple effect of that, of having such you would have low expectations. You wouldn't believe that anything's possible. You don't believe that the child's in there. You don't believe they're listening to you. So it's just this vicious cycle, which is really unfortunate. But thankfully, because of young men like Joao, and actually my friend, I won't say her name, but my friend who has a 19-year-old with nonverbal autism, he likes to walk around with his iPad and watch Barney. And you know, when you look at him, you'd be like, oh my gosh, you know, because he makes weird noises and stuff and he doesn't really, you know, participate. You'd be like, well, he's probably mentally challenged. I have witnessed his RPM sessions, his lessons, and let me tell you, that couldn't be farther from the truth. The kid is amazingly brilliant. The comebacks, the insights, when he was given a lesson on different things, I was just like, holy cow. And when the mom asked, why do you watch Barney? Why do you walk around holding Barney? Because it helps me focus and feel calm and feel soothed, you know? And that's why these communication modalities are so important, because we're really starting to tap into what's going on. So let's undo all of that and let's have an open mind and let's embrace those so-called flaws. Let's embrace the baby programs, the whatever. Let's celebrate them. Let's be thankful that they found something that can soothe them, because they're able to survive and not be completely devastated, you know, by their existence here.
The good thing that these different communication modalities are coming up, and that many nonverbal autistics are finding a voice and a way to communicate, because I think we're getting a different vision of what autism really means, because I think that much about autism, Joao has already written about that, much that has been said about autism sometimes does not really correspond to reality of what the individual with autism feels.
Yes.
Because it has been constructed on the perspective of the outsider.
Mm-hmm. So and we haven't really had much option to know what was going on inside. But again, thanks to Joao and these other kids that are now communicating, we get in there and know what's really in their head. So let's go on. The next question, we have two more questions here. This one's similar to what we just talked about. I just threw it in as a little extra. Question is, should we restrict the use of electronic devices and light up toys for our son with autism? My 14-year-old son loves to play videos on my cell phone. He loves to watch the same video over and over. It's an air conditioner that's spinning around and around. It makes my husband very nervous, and I have to admit it sort of makes me nervous too. I worry about the blue light devices as being bad for his brain. Should we stop him from playing on these devices? He also loves to play with light up toys. That's all he does in his free time if we let him. Should we limit these two? Why does he love these so much?
Dear mom, listen and see your son with your heart, and the answers you seek will be given to you. There is no need to stop the blue light and light up toys for him, because he sees in them focus and comfort from overwhelming surroundings. The least resistance in regard to these that he feels, the less need he will have to seek refuge in them. Blessings.
There's that resistance thing, right? So if you give up on the resistance, right, it's the opposite of what we do. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to limit it. You have to resist it. You have to take it away. And it just makes them want it even more. You know, same with my typical son. You want to take something away or tell them no, they want it even more, even if they don't really want it. You know, it's just, that's just really powerful.
Yes, I can even refer to one of the things that Joao used to do with quite a lot of insistence was he would pick up a pencil or a peg maybe, and he would sit in a corner and he would tap for a long time this object on the floor and just stay there. And although in the beginning I used to look at it once again, okay, I have to stop this. He's an adult or a teenager. I can't have Joao sitting in a corner and tapping. It's not adequate.
Right.
But the thing is, whenever I had that attitude and tried to stop him, I did not manage to get him off that habit.
Mm-hmm.
And it has reduced immensely. Sometimes I do have the soul doctor tapping a little. Maybe on the tape, maybe on the notebook, but it is not with the duration or persistence that it used to be. So once again, if you refocus or you direct your focus to something else, then that annoying habit to us sort of decreases in importance, and it decreases in importance for us and for the individual himself.
Right, because we're not resisting it. I've seen whenever we have really, you know, taken something away or wanted something eliminated from my son's behaviors, he'll find something else to do. He's going to find something, thank God, because he needs to soothe himself. But, you know, in the olden days when I was just like, oh my God, I can't do that, you know, the underlying fear was, if I don't stop him now, he's going to be stuck like that for the rest of his life, and he's never going to outgrow it. And it's like horrible. Like those are the things that my husband and I would talk about that were going through our brain. And there was a part of me that always felt like, nah, I don't think so, which is when I really started buying into the Sunrise program and the whole joining thing. It was like, this really works because it's a different energy. So I think it's important for us to stop freaking out so much and try to take the focus off of the worry and put it on gratitude. Okay, that's the message here. Take it off of the worry, put it on gratitude, no matter what it is. Play with it and see what happens.
Yes, and even as you were talking, Andy, I was thinking perhaps I would love to have the soul doctor at the moment sitting next to me and being present throughout this whole episode. That is what we would expect, and that's what I would love. But I have grown to live with the fact that the soul doctor may not want to comply to my wishes at all times. Right. And what is most important is that we get the soul doctor to answer these questions. So he says, okay, I am willing to answer these questions, but on my own terms and my own timing. If you want it, you got it. If you don't want it, then
right. What do you do? Which is
I'm happy to be with you, sharing his insights.
Yeah. It's all about respect, right?
Yeah.
It's about respecting each person and what they are willing and wanting and able to participate. So it's all about respect, which is a really good thing. Yeah. All right. The last question. Okay. This is one that has to do with excessive video games also. Okay. My 13-year-old son is obsessed with video games. Is this because he is traumatized by the divorce and he is avoiding his feelings? So a little background. My son is a very kind and sensitive soul. He is not autistic, but his older brother is. I am worried about his mental health as it relates to the divorce. I have always felt like he is the peacekeeper and he takes on too much responsibility for those around him. He seems obsessed with video games and YouTube memes. He will watch them for hours by sneaking his computer into his room at night. In this way, is this his way of avoiding feelings and issues? How can I help him?
Dear Mom, your son is indeed a beautiful soul, but he also has a very different outlook on the divorce that you may not have perceived. The way marriage and divorce is seen on earth is often one based on fear. So people try to find ways to get over that fear of lack of commitment and therefore sign contracts of tying or untying, getting married or getting divorced. He is not affected by the divorce, and it may seem so because you are projecting it on him. It is your fear that you may have let him down that gives you that idea. Your son knows that the only energy that bonds is love, and he knows that although apart, all is well. His parents have fulfilled their soul contract of having a family of 3 children, and now the time has come of walking different paths. Tell your son that you are always happy with his outlook on life, even if it seems different to yours. As for the video games, look at what avoidance behaviors you have. And when you work on them, your son will look less evasive and will grow interest in other areas. Blessings.
You know what I love about this one is, Joao often takes us back to look at what's going on in your life because they are often mirrors. And I used to struggle with that concept because I was very into Abraham Hicks and I love their teachings, and I always felt like, okay, whatever is happening around me is because of something inside of me. And I've come to realize that that's not what he's saying. This whole mirror thing, it's not like, okay, I'm doing something wrong and that's why that person's behaving that way. That's not necessarily what's going on. But oftentimes our kids do things that reflect back something about our energy, right? Are we judging them? Are we avoiding something in our lives? Or is this all projecting onto them, right? I'm avoiding something, so he must be avoiding something by doing this, right? It's all this projection and stuff going on. So just another way to look at it that really kind of floored me and was just like wow, that's really cool. That's really cool, projection and what's going on in your own life.
Yes, I can even tell you that I'm a divorced mom too. And I think that all parents, when they go through their divorce, they always think about their children. How is this going to affect my child? And I had those thoughts too in the very beginning, but Joao also gave me a different perspective as a young child. Was around about 11, 12 when he told me that I know I love my mom and I love my dad. I'm okay with you being divorced. You have grown apart in terms of love. So he was referring to romantic love. Mm-hmm. So he accepted it. He was far more mature than I was at the moment, because I was having these feelings, okay, was this the best choice? And I think all parents go through that that perception, okay, is to what extent is my separation going to affect my child? Right. And for Joao, he just gave me the perspective that all is where it should be. Mm-hmm. I love my mom, I love my dad. There is no problem. You have grown apart. So each of you will go will follow your path. You will be happy in your own way. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it's a good lesson because there's a lot of parents with autism. The divorce rate is, I heard numbers like 90%. If the general population is 50%, people with special needs kids have a divorce rate of 90%. So that's good information. And I don't remember where I read Joao's response, but there was another response recently that said, oftentimes one of the parents will start awakening, right? You have this autistic child, they're wanting you to awaken, and one parent will start awakening, and the energy just really gets very far apart, and they don't match anymore, and it's time to move on. Like that soul contract is over and done and time to move on. And this thing that he just said about tying and untying, we have these rules and this fear of lack of commitment. So we set down, like, we're going to tie us together, we're going to untie us together, right? We're going to get married, we're going to get divorced, because somehow that's a piece of paper that can control us in our commitment, right? Which is, you know, I get it. When I was younger, it's like, well, you're going to marry me, you're not going to, you know, what's the saying? You're not gonna buy the cow if you get the milk for free, or something like that, right? You're buying this cow. So that always
certainly true.
But you
and
know,
I do think that Joao has a point. All these things are based on fear, because what brings two people together is the energy of love.
yeah,
And solely that.
yeah,
And that is the greatest marriage you can have. Two souls who decide to share a path based on love and commitment from the heart, and not just because they sign a paper and they feel,
right.
okay, now we're committed.
Right. So yeah, but you know, that's all conditioning, and I think that autism, as we've learned in this discussion today, is all about returning to that inner voice, that inner love, and accepting those around us. So it's just, I mean, I get now what he means about raising humanity. You know, when I first started thinking about this, my initial raising humanity made me feel like, okay, we have to be better to the planet. We can't, you know, poison ourselves. Like, it was much more of a physical thing. But now I see the, you know, overarching spiritual thing. Yes, we have to take care of the planet and be kind to animals and not destroy Mother Earth and all that. But it's also about our interconnections with each other. And it starts here and it moves outward once you start here. So great lessons.
And I think if we're kind to ourselves, if we nurture ourselves on the energy of love, if we are love, the only thing that we can give out is love.
Yes.
So it's love for the other person, it's love for the other beings, animals, nature on the whole, for the whole planet. I think that is the key.
Yes. You know,
for ourselves.
And, you know, I think we should now officially rename ourselves the Autism Love Revolution. This is what he's saying, right? We are now the leaders or the propagators of the Autism Love Revolution, right?
Yes, because I believe that's the only energy that exists, is the energy of love.
Yes.
Some have it to a greater extent, some have to a lesser extent. I think it's Neil Donald Walsh that refers to that. So I really agree with this. The only energy that there is the energy of love.
Absolutely.
So let's get ourselves a cup full.
I drank mine earlier. All right. Well, thank you, Helena. Thank you for your tireless work at helping your son go through all of this and typing up the responses for us. And thank you for the privilege of working with you and your son. And thank you, everybody out there, for spending time with us and listening to us. We're going to keep at it because the world needs more of Joao's voice and these messages. And I, for one, am learning every single day with every single answer that he gives us. So thank you so much, Joao. And thank you, parents, for listening.